I remember thinking to myself, like, I hope nobody sees me reading this in the park. Hola, I'm Juana de la Selva, and today I want to talk to you about this book, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This book I decided to read because I'm a huge fan of Lana Del Rey, and she says that this is one of her favorite books, which, having known what it's about, I was like, do I want to read that book? No, I don't. And over the years, just having been a huge reader, a lot of people refer back to Lolita, and I was like, why does everyone love this book about a pedophile? I decided to finally read it when I found a copy at my library sale. Immediately upon reading it, the very first line, "Light of my life, fire of my loins," is one of Lana Del Rey's lines that she uses in a song of hers. And throughout the book, I actually found a lot of references to her music, Carmen. I'm grateful that I read this book just to understand the references in her music. The book is very strange in the quotes that it has on the cover. "The only convincing love story of our century, Vanity Fair." Nabokov writes prose the only way it should be written, that is, ecstatically, intensely lyrical and wildly funny. Here are my thoughts on that. So, if you don't know, Lolita is a story about a pedophile, a man who is very attracted to nymphets, which is his word for a particular kind of young girl who is sexually interested between the ages of like 9 and 12, 9 and 13. He is a very charming and well-spoken and articulate and intelligent man. He tells you right away that he is a murderer within the first paragraph of the book, and you're kind of like thrown off because he's so eloquent. But then throughout the book, you continue to see his genteel, civilized demeanor peppered with these very creepy little statements that show that he is a complete psychopath. I look up every word that I don't understand so that I make sure to understand what I'm reading. And that was a huge challenge with this book because so much of this book is written in French. I just saw a cool little, there's a squirrel. But it was pretty fun because I would look up the French phrases and listen to them in French. So I feel like I got to listen to a lot of French for a few weeks while I was reading this. This book gave me weird feelings in my stomach all throughout reading it, especially hearing his perspective of how he found the young girls attractive as opposed to women because of how they were downy, and just the way he described them was so visceral that it's like, disgusting, super disturbing. But also, what I find insane and weird is how they would describe this as a convincing love story. This is not a love story. This is an obsession. This is a narcissistic, sociopathic man using a girl and thinking that it's love because he's so obsessed. I'm glad I read this. It was hard to get through. There were times when I was actually amazed by how he has this ability to conjure images in your mind by the way that he writes. His writing style is profoundly incredible. It's worth studying. One of the interesting things I found about the way that he writes is, for example, he would start describing someone and he would say, "I'm passing around glossy photos now." And so you get this vision in your mind of holding a glossy photo of what he's describing. So in that way, he used very precise and not sparse language. He used very precise language to convey exactly what he wanted to conjure in your mind, which I found to be utterly masterful. Do I recommend this book? As a classic, I recommend it for having experience with Nabokov's writing style. I do feel inspired to write more thanks to his style of writing. However, I feel like this was a really hard thing for me to get through because it gave me these sick feelings oftentimes, and I wasn't gonna go around like in public reading this openly, you know? So, and I feel like people look at you strangely if you're reading it because they're like, why are you reading that? So, very controversial. I'm glad that I read it. Not gonna reread it. I don't need to go back to this world. There was one page where I found it to be very romantic, if you'll call it that, where he did say that he still loved Lolita even though she was pregnant with another man's baby, and oh, maybe that just spoiled things for you, but there was a moment toward the end where I do feel like he was describing something that came close to a semblance of actual love, but throughout the rest of the novel he was just being obsessed. So I want to give a little more detail of the premise of Lolita for those of you who don't plan on reading this book or don't know what it's about. It's about a man who is in his late 30s, who is attracted to young girls, and he moves into a household where there's a young girl living there with her mother, and the father is, he's a very handsome man, so women fall for him all the time, and he doesn't date anyone because he's into small children. The mother of Dolores, the little girl he's obsessed with, her name is actually Dolores. The mother of Dolores decides that she's in love with him, with Humbert, and that she can't stand to have him live with her anymore if they can't be together. So he needs to either marry her or move out. So he decides, if I marry her, then I can be a stepdad to Lolita. So he decides to marry her. Well, he marries her and he's like having this farce marriage with her, and she sends Lolita off to school. So he's not able to see Lolita anymore. So he's having to have this fake relationship with this woman that he does not care about at all. And then he's trying to figure out, he's like, man, I really need to kill her because I need to figure out how to get Lolita back, and I need to get her out of the picture. So then a stroke of luck strikes as he is discovered. He's very secretive about the contents of his table. And his wife, Mrs. Hayes, finally she breaks into his table and she finds all of his journals, which talk about his obsession with Dolores, her daughter, and how he actually thinks she's like a fat hag, and he says all these horrible things about her, but he's actually in love with her daughter. So she's completely thrown off and totally flabbergasted and disgusted, and she kicks him out immediately, and she writes a bunch of letters, and she runs across the street, and she promptly gets hit by a car and killed instantly. So this is when you know Humbert is an absolute sociopath. He actually cries from the pure joy and gratitude of her being killed so that he can move forward with his plan to be with his daughter, her daughter. So he actually successfully seems like he's mourning the loss of his wife. And because he didn't do it himself, it was actually an accident, he is able to come across as like, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised and heartbroken that my wife is dead now. And so now he's able to legally take Lolita as his stepdaughter. Well, he knows that Dolores had a crush on him, and they had kissed right before she had left to school. So their little love affair had began, and they had been like cuddling at random times, and there was some things that had gone on. He didn't actually like touch himself, but he just got off while she was sitting on his lap. So anyway, he pulls her out of school, and he manages to get Lolita out of school after the mom died, and takes her on this like long tour where they're living in different hotels, and they begin a relationship. So this book is extremely disturbing in the fact that it's so realistic and how it could happen almost. So yeah, that's basically the gist of the story, is how he becomes the caretaker for this girl and how she eventually escapes and what ends up happening. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear about my review of Lolita today. Have you read Lolita? What did you think? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for taking the time to check out my video today. I'll see you in the next one.